And good evening, everyone. Welcome to this beautiful live stream on the 23rd of July, 2020. Incredible intro from me. I'm joined by the amazing Stu once again. There is a lot of green on the screen indeed. I like to think we agreed on this in advance too. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing very well, thank you. It's good to be here.
Good. It's always nice to have you. Chat is already having a great time. So this is going to be fun. I heard that Rubik is going to prepare a transcript or something. That's going to be quite interesting.
Good luck to that.
We'll have to see if he does. I mean, that's going to be a lot of words he will have to transcribe.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think he is. He's actually saying that with a question. I think it was just someone who would like a transcript of this.
Right.
Well,
I do actually keep a record of the script that I use. It wouldn't necessarily be a transcript, but I'd certainly be happy to distribute the script that I use.
Okay. I mean, it might be interesting to release those at some point afterwards. That might actually be quite interesting. Before we get into these tutorials, of course, we are having our favorite Twitch Prime still at hand. It's no longer 14 days of free membership, but it is currently 400 rune coins, 80 Hearts of Ice, and 20 Treasure Hunter keys. So make sure you claim them. Make sure you follow all the steps. We've had quite a few people claim it but not redeem them in the end, and that's also something that you need to do, so make sure you do that. And without further ado, I kind of want to hand it over to you, Stu.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Right, so welcome back to this tutorial series, a retrospective review of RuneScape's historic tutorials. This week we continue our journey through Unstable Foundations, the 4th version of RuneScape's tutorial. If you created your account between 2009 and 2011, and recall a red dragon fighting a white knight in a cellar beneath Lumbridge, Unstable Foundations was likely the beginning of your adventure. If you remember a similar story with a three-headed green dragon in 2008, that was Learning the Ropes, the 3rd RuneScape tutorial.
I'm just getting confirmation from our producer that we've got the wrong presentation, so we're gonna resolve that. Just so you know who it was Mort Spear. Make sure you tag him on Twitter and send him some cute pictures of animals. He likes those. And it would also be a cheeky reminder that he could have given a better presentation, right? It needs to be nice. So
there we go, that's the one.
Send him some pictures.
Yeah.
There we go, this is the one we wanted. Keep going, Stu.
Okay, great. So moving on to the disclaimer. So, this stream is going to discuss a specific tutorial from RuneScape's past in painstaking detail. We're not showing off a new tutorial or hyping any future content. If you're here for the Q&A with RuneScape's head honchos, sorry to disappoint you, but that will be later this week on Thursday. Today's stream is focused on our tutorial history, so I'd recommend saving your questions about future content for our glorious leaders, best positioned to answer them. But you do get LootScape from this stream, so I hope you enjoy that at the very least. I am unable to see the chat, but my lovely assistant, Poerkie, will keep an eye on your tutorial questions, and will occasionally stop for some relevant Q&A along the way. In last week's episode, we summarized our tutorial journey from 2002 to 2009, and the fundamental design principles of Unstable Foundations. We also explored its character creation, camera, and interaction controls, the task system added in 2010, fully voiced conversation, and the opening cutscene. A White Knight Squire was horribly burned by dragonfire, also destroying the ladder leading out of this mysterious cellar. Savant fought the dragon back, while a goblin dropped into the cellar and started searching the knight's backpack for shinies. Savant implored us to answer the call to adventure, and gave us our first objective, to equip his squire's warm and probably sticky bronze equipment. Then to vanquish the goblin while the knight occupies the dragon. Before we commence inventory management and beating up a poor defenseless goblin, any questions from the chat?
No specific questions from chat right now. There are some people asking about a Q&A. We swapped them around. So currently the plan is to have the Q&A on the first day, and we moved this tutorials that usually is on Thursdays to this Tuesday. So you would have to tune in on Thursday again at 4 PM game time or 5 PM BST, what we're currently in. That's that. If you've got questions, tag at RuneScape or just say them in chat. I'll try and get them out of the way, or out of the way, write them down, and then I'll propose them to Motsu, and that's all I've got.
Okay, thank you, Luke. So, moving on. In the 2009 version of Unstable Foundations, this is the first time the player is required to interact with their side panel. In the 2010 version, they would have first needed to open the task system introduced at that time. The backpack icon appears and begins to flash, along with an instruction and matching icon. The big yellow arrow to point at interfaces is a new addition with this tutorial. It's not been easy to see in these slides so far, but the approach taken with the side interface with all the RS tutorials so far is when you need to interact with the side panel button, it's been to hide and show the button's icon to make it flash. That means that half the time you can't see the icon you're supposed to be looking for, so you may not notice it. Hence the addition of this big animating arrow to draw attention to weak user experience design. The elegant solution there is, rather than hiding and showing the icon, is to have a glowing highlight state for the button, which is what we started doing in later tutorials. So you open the backpack, and you're next instructed to pick up each of the items in the squire's loot pile. You get a bronze plate body, a bronze square shield, and a bronze sword. This is using legitimate equipment you can smith yourself. A new player wouldn't necessarily know that, but when you're later able to smith, it's quite nice to recognize it. The backpack and picking up items are covered, so now we have you equip these 3 items in any order. There's a subtle bit of freedom of choice here in that you can choose which one to pick up first. Use that where you can. Then you're instructed to open the worn equipment panel. Worn equipment is introduced, so you can see the item slots containing the items you've equipped, so you know how to remove them and can see the difference on your avatar. Once you've equipped all 3 items, you're ready for battle. You're instructed to attack the goblin. Combat with the goblin ensues in all its pre-EOC glory. You take turns making green become red. You're sealed in bronze, so the odds are very much in your favor against the unarmed goblin. Numbers happen until one of you dies or decides to walk away, a fitting metaphor for relationships. In a shocking twist that surprises no one, the goblin is first to shuffle off their mortal coil. Disappointingly, the goblin drops not a speck of loot. Even more disappointingly, you're also prevented from taking Savant's stuff. That's what the goblin would have wanted. And that's the backpack. Equipping and combat sections done and dusted. Any questions?
Yes, I've got 2 of you for you, Stu. Just going to reiterate that we did flip the live streams. So this is the tutorials where we talk about previous tutorials that have been in the game. And we are currently at the, what year is this? 2009. Or is this 2012? 9. Okay, yeah. 2009 tutorial. So if this is not of your interest, I would say you probably have your RuneScape by now, so feel free to go somewhere else and come back on Thursday where we plan to have a general Q&A. So I hope that clears that up. But then, without further ado, I'll jump straight into a question for you. In this tutorial, we've briefly mentioned about, or talked about it in the last live stream as well. The way you choose your character and the character customization in the tutorial is very different from any of the other tutorials we've got. Mm-hmm. What could be the reason for that it was so restricted? And is that a good thing in your opinion?
So in terms of it being different, it seems like every time that we do a new tutorial, we also do a new character creation screen. It seems to have been a trend so far. I guess because it's the first step in the process, we look at how we can refine and tune that and learn from previous ones. In terms of how it was restricted, you mean in terms of, like, you choose a class, as it were, you choose a style of outfit. So the intention with this one, I think, was rather than overwhelming you with a lot of choice, kind of choice paralysis of whether you feel like you got to spend like that first 10 minutes customizing exactly which outfit pieces you're having and exactly which colors. I think the intention there was to give you a few different preset styles that are distinctive. Each one is showing off kind of all the potential of the skills, different characters you can be, different things you can do, and then having the level of additional customization, something that a level deeper of being able to modify it further. So that way you can just get people into the game a lot sooner. If you're not that interested in the detailed customization, that it's more adapted to that sort of flow, I think, was the intention with that one.
Mm-hmm. It's I'm with you on that one. I saw the video of one of our new players. I think we even recommended watching that as well. You went through it all the way. I think you even wrote up the points. But that was
I
like
wrote a transcript.
You wrote a transcript of that one, and it was like the person who created it kind of took like 15 minutes customizing the character or something. You said, I believe, Stu, is that correct?
Yeah, it's pretty common in videos that I see that people tend to agonize over their character initially, which is good because it creates a degree of investment. I think that's why a lot of RPGs tend to start you with very detailed character customization, because if you've put that time into making a character that looks the way you want, then you may be more likely to carry on playing afterwards. But the counterpoint to that is that people can wind up draining a lot of their initial resources, including their time in their first gameplay session within that character creation window, and that may impact how far they necessarily get in the rest of that game.
Oh yeah, because I think that's quite interesting that you touch upon that as well, because I once read some research about like you ideally want the first game session or something, you don't want it to be too short nor too long. And there's like this average game session that if it's like a certain length, they will probably be more likely to kind of come back as well.
Yeah.
And of course, like if you spend like 2 hours on character creation, for example, I know it's an extrication, people are just less likely to finish that customization or even finish the tutorial, and they have to do it in 2 parts, which I think isn't great in that sense.
Yeah, and that was a tricky thing we found with Tutorial Island too, is that it takes people usually about 20 minutes to get through Tutorial Island, and that creates a clean break for their first gameplay session. They've got to a new area, but they haven't started doing something new yet that might start to hook them back in. So we found that not a lot of people actually come back for their second session, I think, because of that clean break. So I think that's an aspect towards having a shorter primer, getting you established with goals later on in the rest of the overworld. I think might lead to a smoother retention. But we're going to experiment with that sort of thing and see how it irons out. At least that's the hope anyway.
That sounds quite interesting. And then there was a question from Reinhard Minard, and we've already answered it in prison, but I think it's worth to reiterate. Are there any plans to allow players to replay these tutorials, these other ones?
Unfortunately, no. So for one thing, a lot of them just don't exist anymore. Learn the Ropes was like completely taken out. A lot of them just aren't compatible with the current game. You know, like the evolution of combat has happened since then. We've had this whole new interface system. It's added on since then. And also, they're just really graphically dated. They were some of the earlier ones were built for a fixed screen, where once you are able to see the full area around there, you're going to see a lot of clipped off scenery and graphical artifacts. So I mean, that's why when I brought Tutorial Island back, I had to actually build the thing from scratch again for our current systems. So it's not something that we can really do conveniently. And when we have made them replayable, there's been very, very little usage of that replayability feature. So the costs, unfortunately, don't really weigh out too well with the gains. But you know, replayability is something that I think is worth doing, particularly for key sections that are very useful. Like if I get a chance to revise the Berthel path, for example, something I would definitely like to prioritize is ensuring that the combat interface sections are replayable. At the time that we did them, we thought the Combat Academy would still be around, and that would be providing that space for learning about combat and for returning users and in a more replayable fashion. But now that's basically what we have, so I would want to try and make that more modular and replayable. I think that's probably the ideal, is to be able to replay elements of the mechanics, but not necessarily the whole linear flow, because there may be only certain aspects of that tutorialization that you're interested in. And some of those, sorry, I know I'm talking on this detail a lot.
No, keep going, I enjoy it.
Yeah, and then But that also, we have some replayable tutorials already. You can access them from like the Lumbridge Guide or from Turiel. It reiterates the information that was portrayed through Tutorial Island, or that was within the rest of the path. So yeah, replayability is something that I would definitely like to do more of, and especially in a more modular fashion.
Thank you for that answer, Stu. Continue the story, I would say.
Okie dokie. So, the White Knight thanks you for straight up murdering a dude. It's not easy being green. He directs your attention back to the dragon. Fortunately, Savant has a cunning plan, and he's keen to share the details with you. In a series of camera pans, Savant explains his rather convoluted contrivance. A corner of the cellar's ceiling is supported by 2 wooden pillars. Lure the dragon to the pillars, collapse the pillars. Try not to get crushed by Lumbridge, or drowned, as the river Lum is directly above the cellar. I see no problems with this plan. Savant has some meat in his backpack that he's drugged with a sleeping potion. Either Savant has been planning to dispatch the dragon for some time, or he's not the sort of person I'd invite to a dinner party. Still, apparently there's a nice big dragon-sized food bowl between the weak supportive pillars, which raises some questions, but fortunately this is a short tutorial. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to retrieve the drugged meat, climb over the wall, and put the meat in the dragon's bowl, while Savant keeps the dragon's attention. What could go wrong? Do you have any more questions, or shall I move on?
So because the broadcast just fired, I'll just reiterate the things. RuneScape, the RuneScape account already put it in chat as well. This is these tutorials, so we are talking about previous tutorials and kind of looking at like what's kind of behind those tutorials, and talk a bit about the things of the tutorials, as well as just talking through them and going on a nostalgia trip. And that is because we flipped the live streams around. So usually these tutorials are on Thursday, but this Thursday we will be having a general Q&A. So if that's what you're interested in, I would suggest you come back on Thursday. And that's fine. You probably have your loot up by now. But now we're talking about tutorials and this beautiful tutorial questy kind of thing. So I suggest we do another section, and then I've got a couple of questions for you again.
Okay, great. So moving on to the quest section then. So Savant's scheme, we discover, is sufficiently convoluted to qualify as a quest. The Unstable Foundations quest, in fact. So the quest list icon appears, and we're instructed to click it. We're instructed to choose the quest from a dedicated tutorial category, and we see that the Unstable Foundations quest has already been started. Incidentally, Unstable Foundations inherited the 1 quest point from learning the ropes, and will eventually earn that quest point when we complete this tutorial. Quest points are a rather peculiar resource that can't be removed, only passed over from one quest to another. It can cause us some headaches. For example, Myths of the White Lands inherited one of its quest points from Sheepshearer when it became a mini-quest. The Death of Chivalry still gives a generous 3 quest points because it replaced the Black Knight's Fortress quest. Now, since Unstable Foundations was removed, we have to just start new players with 1 quest point because reasons. Here we also see the complication of the chat parchment having an inconsistent background color, as that yellow text is quite hard to see. It gets even more fun when Mobile and Legacy have additional inconsistent backgrounds and color conventions, I assure you. I'm getting a bit of a headache just thinking about it. Here we see the Unstable Foundations quest journal, a record of all the actions you've performed so far, and a reminder of your current objective. There's also a link here to the quest help system we used to have on the website, which gave you hints about how to proceed at your current state in a quest. Mod Osborne and Mod Rowley started their Jagex careers as editors, and one of their responsibilities was to write these quest help entries. I'm sure it was loads of fun for the whole family. So before we move on to the world map, any questions?
Yes, I've got a couple. First of all, actually, is this do you know if this is the first piece of content that Mod Osborne worked on then as an editor?
Actually, I'm not sure. Probably I think there were things even earlier than this that he worked on, but I've kind of lost track of exactly how soon he started. I know that he's probably going to hate me for saying this, but Salt in the Wound I know was the first project that he was a what was the term we used at the time? So there was essentially designers who overviewed Quest projects and gave assistance and guidance and feedback through them. And Salt in the Wound was the first one he did for that. So, but in terms of news editing, I'm not sure. I'll have to ask him about that one.
Okay. I mean, I saw someone say that it was his first project he kind of worked up. So that's actually quite interesting.
Okay.
I didn't know that. The other question, and this is kind of a follow-up from last Thursday, and I'm curious if you had a chance to dig into this, Stu, is Estoitsu, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, said that we were able to enter Roddeck's cellars to get the antique legs from the older servant if we created an account for Unstable Foundation. We already were able to confirm that was the case last week. Did you do some digging into that as well, or did you have a glance at it?
I must confess I failed to do my homework. I had other work done I needed to do the last couple of days, so I haven't got around to it yet.
Okay.
So, but I do very much believe you that there is a savant in Faldor Castle who is only visible there if you had done the Unstable Foundations quest as a way to, because he does refer at the end towards he's going on to Faldor to, spoilers, inform that the squire's family of his death and so forth. So I haven't looked into it yet to find out if, say, he provides access to anything other than, say, a wardline acknowledgement. I'd imagine that's the case. But I will get around to that. Unfortunately, it's been a busy week.
Well, it's also to still claim the lamps, I think, or the items from that quest.
If you can, then that's awesome. I didn't expect that they would still be available because those. But yeah, I will basically just have to confirm that. But hey, if you've managed to get lamps from him, fantastic. Win.
Cool. All right. Any other one? Let me cross this one off. We've got another one. There was someone earlier in chat, Herald Turkey Boys, was asking, I need help on a quest, can I message you? If you are struggling with a quest, I would wholeheartedly recommend reading up on the wiki. The wiki is very good at creating guest guides where you can kind of follow them step by step. So go there, I would suggest. Then a bit of housekeeping as well. And we've got another question as well for you, Stu. Someone, was it Costanza, asked if they could get the broadcast 15 minutes earlier when the stream starts. Yes, that is what we are always aiming for, and that's what usually happens. Sadly, due to an error, we were not able to get that for this live stream. And we are trying again for Thursday, but from next week it should definitely be fine again. So that's that one. And then the last one was from someone who paid very close attention to the images and I believe to the quest. In Unstable Foundation, the dragon seems to have a ball.
Yeah.
Which makes me wonder whose pet was it, because it needs to be a pet in order to have a ball where it can drink from or eat from, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know that, or are you able to elaborate on that?
So that will all be revealed as we continue. But
okay.
Yes, I think that does allow for a bit of environmental storytelling, because you have to wonder why it's there. It creates a bit of a mystery, and that might encourage you to keep playing. But yes, that mystery will soon be revealed.
Okay, cool. Then I'll keep the other one for after this, and I suggest we continue a little bit further. Let's keep the players teased. Indeed, I like it. It's good.
Okay. So moving on to the world map. So it was quite tricky during those cutscenes to work out where the pillars are. So now to get a lay of the land, the cellar, we open the world map. And we can see with the special world map of the tutorial cellar on the next screen, where we are relative to the pillars and the food bowl. A helpful custom label also tells us the world map is a thing. Excellent, we close the thing. And then continuing the theme of navigation, the relationship between the compass and the minimap are explained. We're instructed to click the compass to reset the minimap to face north. With quests and navigation covered, it's time to get on with the quest. Finally, we get to search Savant's backpack and take his stuff. We then do some adventure gamey stuff. We're in a confined environment and need to interact with the world to solve a puzzle. First, we pick up everything we can. We take an item from a container. We pick up a plank in the scene, then we use things on things. We use the plank on the wall to construct a crude ramp, climb over the wall, and hope there are no snipers. Now that we're deep in a dragon's lair, we circle back to the notion of running away. Again, I'm glad running was removed from the initial controls pop-up. It gets dedicated focus here, and running wasn't a relevant mechanic until you escaped that small room. So, following the instructions, you run past the dragon to the pillars and use the drugged meat on the bowl. Incidentally, in an earlier version of Unstable Foundations, there were 3 food bowls, and you needed to choose the correct one. This was later simplified. Then you automatically hide as a cutscene commences. Savant tells the dragon to shoo, and it's super effective. Presumably the dragon prefers fresh meat to tinned meat, as it's turned its back on the White Knight, and om nom noms the drugged meat in its food bowl. As Savant relocates with his pack to the dragon's den, the dragon drops into a narcotic slumber. That seems like a good chapter break, so any questions? Because we're at the halfway mark.
Oh, we're at the halfway part. This is good. I'm liking the pace we have today. I'm going to see if there's one question, because this is more a hypothetical question after we've talked about the football in general, I think. Mm-hmm. There was a question from Seafurther Castle. I still like your name. I think I said it last time as well. Is this the tutorial where Servant reveals that the quest journal was written by him, or is that learning the ropes? Do you know?
I remember that from Learning the Ropes. He had some dialogue during that saying that, like, I've written some notes down for you as like a segue into the quest journal. There is basically Unstable Foundations is much leaner where it comes to dialogue. There's very little critical path dialogue. And frankly, all the videos that I looked at for research tended to just focus on the critical path. So I'm sure there was some incidental dialogue along the way, but certainly that's not something that I've seen him mention in the footage I found.
Okay, and then we've got another question, or I've got another question from Panlos from Space. It's not Pandas from Space, that would be cruel. In Unstable Foundation, you've got the cave. Could that potentially work as a resource dungeon for baby dragons? What do you think of that as an idea?
I guess potentially it could. The tricky thing with dragons is that you usually need protection from dragonfire to fight them, and I mean, having dragons, I think, right under Lumbridge, I think it's for the purposes of having like fantasy tropes in the starting zone is a good one. But I think if we're establishing that there's a nest of dragons persistently underneath Lumbridge, I think that is maybe leaning towards not really fitting like the starting zone of Lumbridge. I mean, they're only babies, admittedly, and we have baby dragons in Tavily dungeons. So yeah, maybe it's interesting. But I basically they only had one pet dragon here. They didn't have a pair. They hadn't started on their player owned farm yet. So I guess we need to have at least had 2 dragons here to justify that.
Well, I think
it's quite unusual being here.
No, yeah, I think you've got a valid point from a lore perspective here, but I think there's also something like, would you want to repurpose a tutorial area for like combat and like it makes it kind of a scary place, right? Mm-hmm. So you probably don't want those groups to be mixed either.
So in terms of reusing tutorial areas, I don't really see much of a harm in that. Like, for example, Ashdale had its Crassian caves available after it, admittedly through the quest, but and you could access Ashdale afterwards. I mean, being able to come back to these places afterwards, if they have features that are introduced and then are still relevant, I think can be beneficial. I mean, that's obviously not going to work for Tutorial Island because that's supposed to have sunk in between, and there's lore about that one. But if there's an opportunity to give a place more use afterwards, I think that's a good thing. I mean, in this particular case, this environment is quite dated now. It would need some significant graphical updates to bring it back. So, in which case, we may as
Could
well
use some love.
yeah. So we may as well just build a new environment that had no connections really at this stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. And just to put a disclaimer out, this is more so hypothetically speaking. There is nothing like this planned whatsoever. So just as the disclaimer, this is just us hypothetically talking about this. Keep going.
Okay.
I would say.
So, moving on to the next slide. Savant encourages you to show yourself. Before you break into song, he discusses the next phase of his increasingly perplexing plan. Savant reminds you that we need to destroy both these pillars and collapse the ceiling on the dragon. Slaying the dragon in its sleep is perhaps a violation of the White Knight Code, but it would make for a shorter tutorial if we could just slay the dragon in its sleep, and less chance of being buried alive. But he does give us another opportunity to take his free stuff, so I'll allow it. You retrieve a selection of supplies from Savant's bag, including 2 tinderboxes, 2 fuses, cloth, and an oil can. Apparently Savant is not only a drug dealer, but also has been reading the Anarchist's cookbook. He needs somebody to set up us the bomb. I have so many questions. But we dutifully follow the instructions in our quest journal and rip the cloth into 2 rags. Then we soak the rags in oil, combining 2 items in your inventory for the first time. I'm not sure where we're going with this, but oil's well that ends well. Then we wrap a rag around each of the pillars, repeating using an object on an entity. And then we attach a fuse to each of the 2 rags, which again is more of the same. Then we use a tinderbox on Savant to give him one. And now we're ready to burn both pillars in unison and bring the house down. This will be merely the first of many ridiculous solutions you will apply to a quest's dilemma in your adventuring career. But we use our tinderbox on our pillar, light the blue paper, and retire. Savant has a look in his eyes like he just realized how utterly ill-conceived his plan is. But it's too late now. We run. Oh, how we run. We run like Mod Server's mascara. We run like we have a backpack full of energy potions. We run like nobody is watching. And in a brief cutscene, the ceiling collapses on the dragon, in what I assume is the humane and heroic way of defeating a dragon. A massive lump of the ceiling peacefully liquidates the dragon in its sleep. And much to my surprise, both of you are still alive. Any questions?
I'm gonna comment on something else first, and I'm gonna ask a question to our producer, because saying the word "run" reminded me of something I just did, and that we published, I think, yesterday. Motspear, do you know what I'm referring to now? Okay, can you, Motspear, can you go to my Twitter account and look up the top tweet, the latest tweet of mine? And would we be able to potentially share that on the live stream briefly? Because that's... Okay. Okay, Motspear is trying to get this working. So hold your thoughts. We are running away. Like, I'm going to be honest too. I have tried to reenact this scene a little bit. Even though my gear I had is slightly different, but I've tried to reenact this.
Good gracious.
So,
the things you do in your spare time.
Get ready for that. I'm just gonna advertise this, but I just find it very funny, and I'm secretly, I'm not gonna lie, a little bit proud of that, and I'm gonna make you all suffer with me. So that's gonna be great.
I am morbidly fascinated.
This is gonna be a lot of fun. All right. Our producer needs 2 minutes, so I'll ask you another question in a meeting.
Okay,
this one from still for Dust11. Have you ever considered reading bedtime stories on the internet and uploading those YouTube videos?
I haven't, but if there's a call for it, maybe. I mean, I'd be happy to oblige.
I think there is I think it's very soothing and calming to listen to you reading out stories. I would listen to it.
Thank you. Well, I hope I'm not putting you to sleep.
I don't think so. and that is another question. I'm getting nervous now, you know, for what we're going to show in a second. Inspector also has a question. What is he's kind of asking? Oh shit! There we go. Oh, can we get the audio as well? Oh, it's all about the audio. Give it a second.
What on earth?
Welcome. Oh, there we go. We're fixing it live. This is great. Yes, RuneScape is doing TikTok, or we're going to try it out. We're going to have a bit of fun with it. If you're also able to get the audio on this would be amazing. It's like the... Okay, I don't think we can get the audio on it, so make sure to have a look at it yourself. But it's basically the... I go into battle, I'm going to try to fight the battle, and then it's like you run, and then you hear the music say run as well. And I'm running for my dear life, as you can see on that one. So yeah, that's that one. I just thought of it. But I think we're called RuneScape on TikTok. So if you have TikTok for some reason, and you want to see venture on a new platform, go and follow us. It will probably be cringy, but we're going to have a laugh with it. We're going to own it, and we're going to have a good thing with that. So that was that one.
I can't stop watching that. That is fascinating. I like how you've got the smoke effects there at the end, like the ceilings collapsing. So were you specifically intending to reference learning the ropes there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was. Yeah. No, when I went into the office to pick something else up, I was like, you know what? I remember of this, of like learning the ropes now, or unstable foundations. So yeah, I'm going to record this. This is going to fit perfectly into the live stream. So that's what I did.
I'm so proud. It's like I've inspired your cosplay.
There you go. Rubik is linking the link in chat as well. So we've got that. All the joking aside, there, that was what I was going to get at, and then we got this. Inspector asked, "What is your favorite thing?" Or like the question he asks is, which one is better, Tutorial Island or Unstable Foundations? I think that is a bit of a broad question. So I would like to rephrase that slightly, and would like to ask you, what is your favorite thing about this tutorial, Unstable Foundations in general, that you would like to also see in our existing tutorial, if there is something?
Okay, so fundamentally what this is trying to do is focus on core concepts rather than trying to teach you a lot of details or at the start in a very linear fashion. So it's covering your inventory management, gets you into doing some combat, introduces interacting with things in the world, covers your camera controls, conversation. So in that respect, I think it's a stronger start because it's getting those mechanical features resolved right away without necessarily getting into the details of specific skills that you may not particularly want to engage with. And then we'll see at a later stage, it'll then do the skilling later on and give a bit of a branching choice there as well. So in that sense of it focusing on those fundamentals, getting those done sooner and getting you into the game faster, personally I see that as an improvement over Tutorial Island. I think that most of the things that we cover on Tutorial Island could be introduced in a non-linear fashion when you want to learn more about those individual skills. The first quarter of it, I say, has some good things. It's like Tutorial Island starts you off in a confined room to cover the learning your camera controls and so forth. The skill synergy in the next scene, I think, works quite well, other than the burning the shrimp can cause some people some trouble. But after that, it starts to kind of tail off into irrelevance. You know, like it covers the quest list, but in practice, you're not going to actually be able to access a quest for quite a long period of time. It goes into mining and smithing and combat and prayer and banking and all those things, but it does it outside of the context of the rest of the game, where you can actually know where to find banks, know where to find food in the long term. It teaches you in a place outside of it. So my inclination would be for a primer to focus on just teaching you the core interfaces and the basic loops of the game, and enough basically if you had to just know how to survive RuneScape in 5 minutes, that's what the primer, I think, its purpose fulfills. And then having paths afterwards that allows you to go off into different directions, into the specialties that you want to engage with. That would be my preference. So in that respect, personally, I see this as a superior tutorial. But we're also starting to see Unstable Foundations get into some irrelevances in itself. We've seen quite a lot of infantry management reinforcement happening here. This whole thing with defeating the dragon, you're not actually learning very much during the course of that. It was a lot of learning happened quite early on, but a lot of this part sequence I've just gone through, I think, could be streamlined.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you for your opinion on that, Stu.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question. I forgot the name in chat. I've already removed you of my list of questions. I suggest we keep the pace and we do another section again, Stu.
Okay, great. And now we come to the resolution that you're hoping for. And now, in a mysterious twist, a refined, elderly gentleman named Roddick comes out of the closet. Yes, literally. Roddick just appears from a cupboard, where he's been this whole time. Roddick expresses his gratitude that you laminated his pet dragon, and in a gesture that could be seen as overcompensating, Roddick immediately indents himself into service as your advisor. Roddick informs you that you may call on him whenever you wish for advice about how to train your skills or make money. A persistent help button is added to the top right of your interface to talk to your advisor. In the advisor screen, Roddick reviews what you're carrying and where you are to give you context-sensitive advice. Roddick is currently able to tell you that you're in his cellar, below the town of Lumbridge, so that mystery is finally solved. As I mentioned, Unstable Foundations went through a number of changes over time. One of the most major was the introduction of a task list for the tutorial, and a shift away from including the advisor system on the critical path, like you just saw. In later versions, we instead had this conversation, which better justifies all the business with Roddick and the dragon. Roddick no longer refers directly to himself as your advisor, and you aren't instructed to use the advisor system during the tutorial. Another fun fact about Roddick: environment artists sometimes use this NPC as a measuring stick. He's one of the taller humans, which is useful to ensure doorways are an appropriate height. Roddick's feet are also planted in a fairly wide stance, which makes Roddick useful for testing height maps are appropriately aligned to the floor. Incidentally, this side room is where Roddick's dragon hatched, and there's a bookcase where you can claim Roddick's diary and a manual on the care of dragons. This provides optional backstory, which can be claimed after the tutorial if you miss it, for those that are interested. This approach avoids putting story details on the critical path, where some players may be less interested. Also, if you completed Unstable Foundations before it was removed, Roddick has additional dialogue, and his diary contains more information. Any questions before I move on?
Yes, I've got two.
Great.
Is Roderick still used to measure heights in game and stuff as well, to test out nowadays?
I think so. I must admit, since I moved to core experience, we don't tend to do much where we get to engage with environment artists the same way as the episodic content guys do. So I'm not sure if they necessarily have better tools nowadays with working on things like archaeology. But last time I knew, it was still the case that it was used for that purpose.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that. That's actually interesting. I didn't know that. I like how we have like kind of this one main NPC for it who does that. Then the second question, I just want to respond to Helen MCB, who is asking the questions. Are these intended to be more boring than the coronavirus updates in the UK? They might be as boring in your opinion. They are at least as informative as those kind of things, and it's good to listen to them. But then again, there are also people that find that interesting to listen. So if it's not your cup of tea, please go somewhere else. You're more than welcome to. This is not actual important life-saving information. But nonetheless, we still think it's very informative. So please enjoy. There you go. People are saying it's thrilling now.
Thank you for defending me there.
It's a nice one to educate people about that. It's important to read about those things and hear about those things. And I could also draw the comparison that was very informative. It did not come off as strong as I wanted to, but I do think it is worth doing.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I'll openly admit that this series, it's very niche. Most people will not find this interesting. I fully acknowledge that. That's why we usually do it on a additional Thursday stream. On this particular case, we needed to move around the schedule to ensure that the people who we want to have in for the Q&A are available. Unfortunately, my apologies that this is in the Tuesday slot this week. It's an outlier. It's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but it's an area of passion for me, and some players enjoyed looking into this aspect with me as well. So
just letting you know, since I said that, I think we have at least 30 messages saying that's not boring. They love these streams and they find them very interesting. So just relaying that information as well, Stu.
That is very reassuring. Thank you, everybody. Love you guys.
I think it was also more of a fun comment from that user, but I just felt the need to reply to it for funds. Because apparently to someone else in the chat, I've got sass. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Anyways, so we just talked about the pet dragon that we killed. And Are You the Batman asked this question earlier. So does that make the player a hypocrite for killing a pet? Well, he now raises dragon pets himself.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think that this is kind of a story structure issue here. I think in that if you want to try to start your quest with something that's your tutorial with something that has this it has an exciting pitch to it. You know, there's this enemy to defeat. Once you've established that threat, it needs to be a threat that can reasonably be dispatched by a completely new player. They're not necessarily going to have the resources available to them to defeat a dragon straight away. Hence, we have a rather convoluted solution to doing so. So I think it's kind of written itself into a corner here. And I mean, you know, convoluted solutions to simple problems are, I think, integral to questing to an extent. So in some ways, it's showing what the game is like. But I feel like it does stretch credibility a little bit. I think that ideally, if you're going to set up some kind of threat, try to make it one that it's reasonable for you to dispatch under your own power, and that's potentially more empowering. It feels a bit more earned. I'm in two minds about it, because on one hand, it's amusing and entertaining for it to be so convoluted, but on the other hand, it does kind of take you out of the moment. At least that was my experience playing through it.
No,
I'd be interested to see how the people feel.
I mean, let us know what you think about it in chat. But I can see how it also can feel convoluted. And then again, I'm only listening to your story here about it, and I've not played the quest myself, so I'm probably not the best person to give my opinion on it. Shall we do another section, and then we'll get back to that if there's some interesting opinions on it?
Yeah, great. Okay, so moving on. Savant suddenly becomes quite needy and insists you return all your items to him. Your new advisor reassures you that he'll be able to help you get your own useful items once he lets you out of his cellar. Roddick seems quite level-headed in a crisis, considering you're all trapped underground, with only a severely tenderized and slowly decomposing dragon for sustenance. You use an item on Savant, which you already had to do previously, so I'm not sure what this is teaching, but at least you don't have to use every one of these items in your backpack on him. Now that you have been freed of the burden of all your material possessions, with that highest priority addressed, we can find a way out of this death trap. We turn our attention to two sections of wall, conveniently damaged when the ceiling collapsed. One route to freedom is blocked by rocks, the other by tree roots. Savant suggests that your new advisor can teach you how to clear either obstacle. And here we have a significant choice in the tutorial: mining or woodcutting. Roddick gives you a hatchet or a pickaxe, which could be wielded as a weapon, and you attempt to clear the obstacle of your choice. Doing so reveals that you need level 2 in woodcutting or mining. You're then guided to view the skills menu. Here, the concept of gaining experience to increase these skill levels is explained, and that leveling your skills unlocks more advanced options. You're then, in earlier versions, instructed to open the Objectives screen. Your objective system recommends activities when you want to do something to do. And your objective has been set to raise your woodcutting level from 1 to 2. Now you're instructed to seek Roddick's advice about your objective. You can determine the purpose of woodcutting or how to increase your woodcutting level. Choosing the latter, Roddick directs you to some nearby roots which can be chopped with 1 woodcutting, so you can earn the necessary experience to gain a level. You're then advised that the objective screen will track your progress to your objective, and you can check the skills panel to see how much experience you've earned. The objective system and its close integration with the advisor system were removed in later versions of Unstable Foundations, where instead the tasks list features, since it followed on to the Lumbridge introductory tasks. You swing your hatchet at the root until you gain enough woodcutting experience to achieve level 2, as well as some stacking bits of wood. You apply your newly honed skill to the problem and clear away the roots or the rocks. Roddick takes a page out of Savant's Manual of Misery and sneakily takes his hatchet or pickaxe back off you when you climb through the hole. There's one last instruction to drop the root or rock chippings you accumulated. This is to teach you how to drop items, and that they will despawn after a time. This tutorial seems particularly keen to keep things neat and tidy. And with all the loose ends tidied up, Savant thanks you for your help in defeating the dragon, and promises you a reward. You escape up the ladder to freedom. And as you emerge into Lumbridge, you complete the Unstable Foundations quest. Congratulations, quest complete. Any questions?
Yes, of course I do. I mean, I'm always keeping an eye out. Just to answer someone's question quickly, no, I was not blowing a kiss at someone. I was blowing away some dust that was in front of my eyes, and it's still there, which is really frustrating me. The other bit, which I want to go back to because I find that very fascinating, and I'm kind of curious how you look at that, is you could choose between wood cutting and mining, but it was also very clearly that you would like the goal or the achievement would be the same. It's like you would just be able to get past it. How important or what do you think the value of these kind of choices are in like a tutorial? Do they empower the player, or is it like a bit meaningless, you think?
So I think that it was a good thing to have a choice here. Ultimately, you're choosing between one gathering skill or another. The outcome is the same, but it's giving you some degree of personalization, and it does have impact too. As you can see here, you gain additional levels in woodcutting due to that choice you've made. So this is partly an antidote to the linearity of Tutorial Island, so that you don't, when you're starting to resent that being on a railroad for a while, it starts to give you a sense of some control over your destiny and a sense of personalization of your character. So I think this was a positive thing to do, and it's doing it in such a way that it's telegraphing that it's not going to have a significantly different outcome. The flow is quite similar, but it being there, I think, is definitely beneficial. I think it's the sort of thing that, where it comes to say when we do paths, we don't give you a lot of paths to do right away because that can be quite overwhelming. We open it up gradually and give you like 2 choices and then 3 choices, and generally don't go beyond 3 choices within a path book, because otherwise you can be kind of struggling to choose between one or the other. It creates a kind of choice paralysis, at least until the later stage when things really open up. So yeah, I think that this is a positive thing to do, and particularly when it's things where you're choosing between 2 very similar things, like 2 gathering skills. Yeah, I'd certainly advocate this for future tutorials.
Yeah, well, because the two things that you said, which I think is quite interesting, it shows that these skills are very similar, without saying it directly. So you've now figured out how woodcutting as a whole works. So it you can assume it will work similar for mining, which
Yeah,
is
it's
kind of
teaching
like
you. Yeah,
Go
it's
for it.
teaching you the concept of gathering skills as opposed to specifically how to do one skill. So yeah, I think that's something that this tutorial does very, very well. It looks at the broad concepts rather than getting too stuck in the fine details.
Yeah, no, I find that quite interesting. And the second one that I find quite interesting as well, which is maybe something that I did not really think of, is you mentioned about like a choice of player or like the player's choice, but like it also impacts the story in one way. So they either leave the tutorial island with like level 2 mining or level 2 woodcutting, or they leave the tutorial island, which I also find quite an interesting one, because I still initially thought like it's kind of a meaningless choice, but it kind of does have like it does impact your feature, which is quite nice.
Yeah.
I just want to say that I find that quite interesting. Are we going to move into Stu and A now, or do we have a few more
So
slides?
I have a little section just at the end, a little epilogue, but that won't take very long to do.
Shall we do that and then move into tutorials, or is there something you mentioned before?
No, that's great.
Okay.
Yeah, so this, as you can see, it's shorter than other tutorials, significantly shorter than Learning the Ropes. So we've rattled through it really quickly. I just want to address one thing that I find quite interesting about that skill choice that we've had earlier. The drawback to that is that firstly, it's very systemically heavy, because there is needing to introduce the objective system and the advisor system at the time. It's taking you out of the world quite a lot, getting you to engage with these interfaces in order to progress through it. And also, it's set up a scenario where you're not using that skill in the way that it's normally used. You know, you're using it to break through a barrier. You're cutting these roots on the side of a wall rather than necessarily a tree. So it's not a exact representation of how the skill would normally be used. Where possible, it's ideal to try to remain within the context of how you would continue to use the skill. So it doesn't want it being too abstract. So you can learn a repeatable loop from it. Anyway, moving on to the next section. So we've earned 2 levels in your chosen skill, woodcutting or mining, and we're currently in an instance of Lumbridge in Explorer Jack's house near the general store. This is also where the Lumbridge introductory tasks began, but more about that next time. Savant would like to say farewell, so we'll indulge him. Savant has accomplished his mission. Roddick's dragon is no longer a threat. Unlike Learning the Ropes, this dragon is ludicrous giblets, and definitely not coming back. Savant reports he'll head back to Faldor and depart to inform his squire's family of his death by barbecue. Roddick then wishes to offer you some passing advice about what he assumes is your first visit to Lumbridge. Roddick encourages you to use the objective system to choose a random objective, and to contact him for advice should you require it. This then takes you to this screen, where you can choose suitable objectives, either the next level in an attainable skill, or to complete a nearby quest. In turn, Roddick has advice on a variety of topics, such as how to make money from selling logs, how to burn logs, where to get some free stuff, and he mentions that fletching is a thing. Some of these concepts are covered through mini tutorials, intended as a more interactive way of learning things. And so you depart. Roddick wanders off to his own home, where the Learning the Ropes cellar used to be. You then arrive in Lumbridge for reals, as you can see with all the yellow dots on the minimap, with one final reminder to use the advisor button for help completing your objective. And that brings us to the end of 2009's Tutorial 3, Unstable Foundations. And I'll use the last bit of information there to end us. So let's do the questions now.
Cool.
I think there's a Q&A slide after this.
We're gonna see if there is another Q&A slide.
There we
There it is. We've got the Stu and backup, which is quite interesting. Got a couple of questions. If there are any questions about this tutorial, or maybe slightly broader in tutorials, put them in the chat now, and I'll try and read as many as possible to Stu. What are you doing, Motspear? You keep doing that. Stu, do you know if we have some kind of information about how many all the accounts log into midway through all the tutorials? I imagine that is very, very few.
So information about how many accounts are logged into earlier tutorials?
Yeah, like if they start picking up the game again, that they log into midway through one of our old tutorials.
In terms of whether we can retrieve that information on all those current accounts before they've logged back in, I'm honestly not sure. Yeah, I couldn't. I don't actually. To be honest, I've never worked in player support. I don't actually know a lot of our core account management systems to really answer that one. So maybe I know that we trigger various game log events on login. So some of them, at least the later ones where we had analytics tracking built into them, we'd be able to reach them on that login. But yeah, good grief. I'm sorry, I couldn't answer that one.
Yeah,
maybe probably is the best I could say.
Well, we are probably able to figure something out, but I think that the people that do experience, I don't think they're that many. I think we can probably count them on one hand each week.
Yeah, it's a basic case of if someone logged out and then hasn't played their account for a very long period of time, we may have to shunt them forward into a later tutorial. So it really depends on how long someone's been lapsed.
Oh yeah, and I think that if you only create an account in the tutorial and then you never came back, the likelihood that you remember that account is also quite low. So I imagine you would also just create a new account, which I think is quite likely as well. Some tutorial, slightly broader question to tutorial, and I think it's the right moment because we kind of reached the end there. Is Motspear, you're a kid in a toy store right now. I like it. How long should a tutorial ideally take, in your opinion? What's to?
So first of all, the notion of a tutorial is one that I think needs refinement. I feel in our tutorial history, we tend to think of Tutorial Island, that first 20 minutes, as being the tutorial. In practice, tutorializing something is something that I feel needs to be an ongoing experience, just because of the sheer volume of content that needs to be discovered. You know, you have your first 5-minute primer, you have your first hour to half hour to an hour of gameplay, first 4 hours experience, your first day playing, your first week, and so on. And these kind of are milestones along the journey of a new user, and those need to be considered independently as to the degree of tutorialization that takes place during them, and ensuring that when the player needs to interact with the part of the game, that aspect is introduced appropriately. So, for example, Dungeoneering has an embedded tutorial that when through your first couple of rooms of that initial dungeon, it introduces the mechanics in a steady fashion, and it helps guide you through that works. Archaeology has its own tutorial. Divination has a tutorial. So it's not so much about your initial tutorial experience as about extrapolating that out to all the different parts of the game, ensuring that they suitably give you the information necessary to engage with that content. In terms of preference, though, I would say try to keep your initial primer as short as possible. I'd say any more than 5 minutes, you're in danger of getting into extraneous details that may become irrelevant to a core user. I think that's probably the sweet spot. If you can try to cover the essentials that you need to be able to, and a lot of that is like engagement with the interface and world interaction and controlling your character, the very basic stuff. And ideally have that in a way that's replayable as well. Or certainly elements of that are replayable afterwards if you need a refresher. There's an aspect there where it overlaps with a returner funnel when people have been away from the game for a while and they've forgotten some of the fundamentals, or maybe some of the fundamentals systems have changed. being able to access those in a modular, replayable way is a beneficial thing. So I'd say essentially, in terms of that early tutorial experience, try to make as little of it mandatory as possible. Make it available elsewhere so that you get that value of the returning user is how it would go.
And yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think maybe I'm saying it very pretty much as a TLDR. Is it kind of like you just want to give them all the information they need to be able to continue? You don't want to give them information they don't need, and you want to keep it as concise as possible?
Yeah, that's a very good way of abbreviating my very long explanation.
Yeah, I mean, please tell me if I'm wrong as well.
That's a good, distinct answer. Thank you.
iDark420, great name by the way, asks, so Unstable Foundations was a quest, right? Or was that Learning the Ropes? I keep forgetting which of the two was.
Well, both actually. Both of them were plugged into the quest system. Yeah.
For one, you would actually get a quest point, though, wasn't it?
Yep, that's right.
So that's also why you now start on one quest point. Fun fact. Would we ever consider, or would it be relatively easy to just release those tutorials in one form, one way or shape as an actual standalone quest, where we rip out the more so tutorial parts, but we can still kind of keep it as a quest, because we've got some weird, funky quests in our game.
The trouble with that is that these things are kind of structured for tutorial purposes. So if you rip out the teaching you the gameplay elements, and you'd either have to heavily rework them or remove them, there isn't really much to work with there for a quest, because it's just a series of things that you're doing in kind of a trivial fashion. Yeah, I think I would probably rather that time went towards making a legitimate quest, to be honest. But particularly as just point. What we have here, that raw resource is just so dated that I don't think it would really translate to a particularly compelling quest, I'm afraid.
Okay, fair point. I think these are some real answers, right? And I'm with you as well on that. Another one. This one is from
I guess the question that the question I'm curious about, maybe someone can post this in the chat there, is why are you wanting to play these tutorials again? What is it about it that you would want it to be in the form of a quest? What's attractive to you about it? Because maybe we can take that into account in future quests, or look at aspects of maybe the story within a path that might suit it, something that might be suitable for mini quests. So if we understand what your need is there, then we can look at how we can try to fulfill that.
I think that is a very good response there. I'll keep an eye out on chat if there's something. Another question is from Inspector. You've had quite a few really interesting questions, so keep those up for future streams as well, Inspector. In your opinion, Stu, what should a good tutorial give you as a reward for finishing it?
So that's an interesting one in itself, rewards for tutorials, because there's going to be some users that resent your tutorial. They're already familiar with the game. They might be creating an Iron Man or an alt. They would resent having to go through this tutorial experience. If you then lock rewards behind that tutorial, that enforces that frustration. It's similar to the comp cape paradigm. If you put this reward for getting something, then some users will resent having to go through those steps of getting it, because their focus is not on the journey of doing the content, it's on getting the reward at the end. So my inclination would be to put rewards in tutorials, ideally not at all. If you are going to include rewards, make them things that are easily accessible elsewhere. Things that they might feel valuable to a new user because they're brand new, but in practice, these are actually very commonplace, cheap items, so that other people don't feel like the tutorial is mandatory. Yeah, that's something I've kind of had opposition with, because my producer wants to have rewards along the steps of the tutorials, and that kind of creates an issue of a different kind of user would expect that. Like the achievement diaries, the beginner achievement diaries in Lumbridge, for example, had an interesting issue there. You were given an amount of coins for completing each of those achievements. And then we had this endless issue of people wanted, after those were no longer the starting tasks, there was this big payload of coins that Explorer Jack could give you for no particular reason, and people wanted that to stay in the game so that they had essentially just access to the free stuff. So, and that created no end of issues when we needed to convert to the new achievement system. So having the reward is kind of nice as a new user. It's reinforcing. It's feeling, my time is a little bit more valuable. I want to keep playing. But we have to also factor in existing users and how they perceive those rewards.
Thank you. It's very interesting to see the chat about this, because they're like, there are like quite a few things that you said that they didn't really think about, and at the same time they're also like, well, a tutorial shouldn't be too rewarding, or like the certificate you get at the end is the reward. You can now play the full game. Like, it's kind of interesting to see all these different opinions on what a good reward consists of for a tutorial, and I think that's probably also different for everyone in the end.
Yeah, true, very true.
So yeah, I am suggesting, because we're already 10 minutes past time as well, that we should probably round it up. Was there anything that you particularly wanted to say?
Yeah, let me just do this last segue to take us into our next episode, and then I'll be good to stop from there. So that brings us to the end of 2009's Tutorial 3, Unstable Foundations. But this tutorial had an eventful 3-year journey. Over time, Unstable Foundations adapted to include a list of tasks, the removal of the objective system, and significant downplaying of the advisor system. Unstable Foundations was also modified to progress onto Explorer Jack's introductory tasks in Lumbridge, which eventually replaced Unstable Foundations as the tutorial in 2011. But that's the subject for a future episode. Okay, I'm done.
Nice. Now we're back into the full suite as well. Now you can see our beautiful green shirts again. I like how we're matching up still. Thank you everyone for watching. Very important. We really appreciate it. I think I'm still having a laugh. I think you two have a laugh talking about this. I can still just hear the passion about these kinds of things, about tutorials, which I just enjoy getting. Chat seems to be great as well.
Good.
So, the 3 things that I've got, a couple of questions which are unrelated. Sammy asked, hello, is the timetable for the next stream correct? One announced is Thursday on 4 PM game time, and the other is at 11 game time. The 4 PM game time one on Thursday is probably the general Q&A. That is still happening. I imagine if there is also a stream for 11 game time, that might be our featured streamer. But we don't have an official stream planned for that time, so I suggest to double check that. But what's in our news post is accurate. I can remove that one. Then there was also a question from Dashelgar17, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, who's talking about Twitch Prime, that you've got it linked for a while, and that you've received all the rewards except this one. I believe that the way the Twitch Prime works is slightly different now. So aside from claiming it at Twitch Prime or on the Twitch website, you now also have to redeem it on the RuneScape page. So make sure you look up the FAQ, and that should help you through it. Which also brings me to the point to what the Twitch Prime loot right now is, which is 400 rune coins, 20 treasure hunter keys, and 80 hearts of ice, which is a nice package to get you started or get some cool cosmetics. We've got these 2 out of the way. So once again, we're going to have a general Q&A on Thursday, 4 PM game time, and straight after that, at 5 PM game time, there will probably be a bit of overlap anyways. We have a very cool community event where we're kind of going to do a diversity parade. Let me find the exact name, which I think is going to be really cool to check out. I'll probably come around and bring some of the Stroop waffles, which is very important. The Community Pride event, which will be on World 23 at 5 PM game time. And we're going to start at the Lumbridge Courtyard, so make sure you're there. I think that will be a lot of fun as well. Then I've said all the things that I wanted to say and needed to say. If there is nothing else from you, Stu?
Nope, nothing more from me.
There we go. Then there's only... there are 2 things to say. That's my phrase and your phrase, Stu. I keep forgetting your goodbye phrase. But anyways, guys, look after yourselves and tot ziens.
See you next time.